While it is usually the Western powers that are remembered for developing innovative and conceptual weapons of the Second World War, it is actually the Japanese that took the lead when it came to experimental military technologies. Here is a list of 10 secret weapons of the Japanese that were developed during the Second World War era.
They develop a technology that is absolutely brilliant. Simple in its approach, but the technical.
Number 10. Fuji balloon bombs. This particular weapon of the Japanese is exactly what it sounds like. Balloon bombs that were fashioned as a vengeance weapon when military planners failed to develop an intercontinental missile instead of coming up with the idea of balloon bombs. In order to make these bombs work, the Japanese attached incendiary bombs to normal balloons that could travel 5,000 miles towards the United States along the jet stream. The intention of these balloon bombs was to have them explode over the forested regions of the Pacific Northwest and start large forest fires that will end up diverting precious U.S. manpower. Quite a sneaky move. The Japanese decided to make these balloon bombs 33 feet in diameter with the ability to lift approximately 1,000 pounds. When the first balloons were launched in late 1944, some landed in California, Wyoming, and even Canada, with over 285 total confirmed landings and/or sightings made. Number 9. Sentoku-class megasub. Being the sneaky people that they are, the Japanese managed to build 3 of these behemoths during the war, which are vessels that hold the record as the largest conventionally powered submarines ever built. They were designed to attack the Panama Canal as part of the Japanese's plan to dominate the Pacific Ocean that includes the western seaboard of the United States. These subs were equipped with 3 Aichi M6A1 airplanes that could carry a torpedo or up to 1,763 pounds, 80 kilograms, of bombs. They were kept in a watertight, pressure-resistant hangar with the planes launched from a catapult located in front of the tower. All 3 of these subs could be assembled, fueled, armed, and launched within 45 minutes of surfacing. It even had a German-inspired snorkel that was coated with a thick, rubber-like substance that was designed to absorb radar and sonar signals. However, the Japanese didn't get to use them as the war ended shortly after they were manufactured.
At first, I refused to do it, but then they wouldn't allow me to eat. It was an order. Gradually, I changed.
Number 8. 731 and the use of bioweapons. From 1937 to the end of the war, the Japanese spent their time experimenting with various biological weapons, which also included the toxic defoliation bacilli bomb and the flea bomb that was used to spread bubonic plague. The covert biological and chemical warfare research and development unit called the Imperial Japanese Army's notorious Unit 731 performed various tests on human subjects with bubonic plague, smallpox, cholera, botulism, and other diseases. These bombs were then used by Japanese soldiers to launch biological attacks, infecting agriculture, reservoirs, wells, and other areas. According to a historian at California State University in Northridge, Sheldon H. Harris, more than 200,000 Chinese were killed in germ warfare field experiments. The Japanese also planned to use these weapons against American soldiers, becoming the only country to use biological weapons such as mustard gas during the Second World War. Number 7. The FUKURYI suicide attack suits. The Japanese designed these special dive suits for their special attack units to use to fend off an invasion of the home islands by Allied forces. These suits were armed with a mine containing 33 pounds of explosives attached to a 16-foot bamboo pole. The divers that were weighed down by 20 pounds of lead could walk underwater for as long as 6 hours at depths of 16 to 23 feet. Upon reaching the hull of an enemy ship, the divers would then detonate the explosives and kill themselves in the process. Although it is not confirmed whether this suit was ever used in combat, there are many accounts of the U.S. infantry landing craft and surveyor ship being attacked by suicide swimmers that make us believe that maybe these suicide attack suits were in fact used by the Japanese. Number 6. The purple encryption machine. Probably the most famous encryption device of the Second World War, we have the German Enigma machine that was not the only encryption device available. In 1973, the Japanese managed to develop the 97 Shiki-Obun Injiki, or 97 alphabetical typewriter, which was named after its creation in the Japanese year 2587. However, this device was more widely known by the U.S. codename Purple. With 2 typewriters and an electric rotor system with a 25-character alphabetical switchboard, the machine could have a plain text or unencrypted message manually inputted into it, much like the Enigma machine that inspired it. However, its main innovation was the second electric typewriter that could print out the encrypted message onto a piece of paper, whereas Enigma could only present the text in the form of blinking lights. Thus, there was only one person needed to operate it, and since the key was changed by the Japanese on a regular basis, no codebreaker was able to find a pattern in the messages. Number 5. YOKOSUKA MXY-7 OHKA kamikaze plane. As the war progressed and Japanese found ways to refine their kamikaze techniques, they focused on developing aircrafts that would explicitly serve that purpose. The YOKOSUKA MXY-7 was a rocket-propelled aircraft that first came out in September of 1944. In order to build the machine, as little important raw material as possible was used by the Japanese, as the plane's construction was extremely rudimentary. The OHKA was released when the target was within close range, having been carried under the fuselage of a Mitsubishi G4M. The pilot tried to glide as close to the target as possible before proceeding to fire rockets and smashing them into the targets. This weapon had a 2,643-pound warhead, and the intense speed it possessed makes it virtually impossible to intercept by anti-aircraft fire. However, it could be extremely vulnerable during the gliding phase along with the carrier plane. Number 4. Mitsubishi J8M Shushi rocket-powered interceptor aircraft. Although it resembles the German Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet, it is quite different. Supposed to be a license-built copy of the advanced Nazi aircraft, the Germans failed to ship a functional version of the J8M-1 to Japan. Instead, the Japanese designers reverse-engineered the advanced attack plane from a flight operations manual and limited technical blueprints. After the Allied bombing campaign in Europe, the Japanese were looking forward to building an interceptor plane. Although military planners had a fear it would only be a matter of time before a similar campaign reached Japan. However, even though they did not have a functional model to work off of, a single prototype managed to be tested before the end of the war. On July 7, 1945, the J8M-1 made its inaugural flight, which ended up being quite brief and disastrous. Although the J8M-1 had a successful takeoff, the engine failed during the steep climb, crashed, and the pilot got killed. Number 3. OI Super and Ultra Heavy Tanks. While the Japanese aren't necessarily remembered for their tanks, they did have some seriously good ones, including the 97 Chiha medium tank. But when the war was almost to an end, the Japanese had what most call a crazy idea to build a super heavy and even ultra heavy tank that could be used in the Pacific theater. These beasts would be massive to look at and would be capable of carrying a crew of 11 people in its 100 to 120 ton body. The super heavy tanks had 3 turrets, 1 large cannon, and 2 smaller guns. There was a report that claims of one of these tanks was sent to Manchuria, but nobody knows if it ever saw combat. The Ultra Heavy IO, an advanced experimental prototype, would have featured 4 turrets instead of 3. Number 2. Kugo Death Ray. Like many others, the Japanese also wanted to develop a concentrated beam of energy that could take down aircrafts hundreds of miles away, also known as the Death Ray. According to documents that were confiscated by the U.S. military once the war was over, the Japanese had already begun work on a death ray in as early as 1939 at laboratories in Noborito. As a result, the researchers ended up developing a high-powered magnetron that could generate a beam of radiation. The magnetron, developed by physicist Shinichiro Tomonaga's team, measured 8 inches in diameter with an output that rated 100 kilowatts. However, there is doubt whether this technology would have worked like we have seen death rays work in science fiction. But according to the calculations, the beam, if properly focused, could have killed a rabbit over a distance of 1,000 yards. However, only if the rabbit had stayed perfectly still for at least 5 minutes, which doesn't really happen. Number 1. Flying tanks. The most unbelievable one of the Japanese weapons, these flying, or rather gliding, tanks were developed as a potential solution to the Japanese military's problem of transporting heavy equipment like tanks from island to island. These light tanks had detachable wings, empennage that are stabilizing surfaces at the tail end of the aircraft, and takeoff carriages. But since the tracks of the tank failed to survive a landing, a pair of detachable skis were attached to the machine. Once they were detached from the aircraft like the Mitsubishi Ki-21 heavy bomber, it would glide to the destination and go back to being an armored ground vehicle. And that's a wrap on the 10 secret weapons of the Japanese. Did you know the Japanese were hiding away these secret weapons? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.